Okay, here we go. So we've talked about blood and blood vessels. We've talked about the lymphatic system. And so now we're going to talk about the immune system. And so we're really going to start to be putting lots of stuff together where we've talked about blood. We've talked about how blood is composed of red blood cells and white blood cells. Well, those white blood cells, those are your immune cells, okay? We've talked about how we travel, the lymphatics help disperse and move interstitial fluid, now called lymph, through the lymphatics, and how we can monitor that and surveil it and hopefully mark things and catch those and get rid of bacteria and things like that. And so how do we do this? What's actually going on? Because I've kind of been leading up to the actual how the immune system works. So what is the immune system? Okay, it's how we resist disease. Okay, it's the system responsible for disease resistance. And I think I may have said in an earlier video where the lymphatics and the immune system go together. Well, the immune system is also part of the cardiovascular system. You think about the blood system, because the blood is made up of white blood cells. So really, when you want to talk immunity, you're talking blood, you're talking lymphatics, you're talking immunity. All of these things are working together, okay? And so we've got many different ways for our bodies to try to resist disease. And we do it in kind of two major ways. We have what's called a non-specific defense system and a specific defense system, okay? And so the non-specific, we use the word innate, okay? And it's what we're born with. And this can be a localized defense. The adaptive or specific can be widespread, all right? And I'm going to break this lecture down into basically innate systems and then adaptive systems in another video. And so when I think about innate systems, I'm going to go to this next slide. You're thinking about things like surface barriers, like the skin, like mucous membranes. So if I was to cut my hand, the skin is a protective layer, right? We've talked about the skin itself being a protective barrier. We've talked about that it secretes an acidic mantle, which helps keep bacterial growth down on your skin. There are cells that are part of the skin that are ready to fight off infection. So you have surface barriers, okay, and then you have your internal defenses, which are those things that are a little bit deeper than the surface barrier, and those are those cells that can attack. So you have your surface barriers, also your mucous membranes, like inside your nose, inside your mouth. Those are sticky, and that can help catch things that need to be gotten rid of. So these are innate. They'll catch anything. The skin will block anything. It's not specific, okay, so it's not specific. All right. Again, those internal defenses are things like phagocytes, things that are called natural killer cells, inflammation, antimicrobial proteins, fever, like a local inflammation, local redness and heat around an area. Those are, again, all non-specific ways to defend ourselves against disease. Now, the adaptive ways are things that are widespread, and they're specific, okay? So these phagocytes, they'll attack anything. They may attack a splinter, they may attack bacteria, they may attack whatever has invaded the area. Whereas these adaptive or specific systems, they include our B cells and T cells. And the B cells make antibodies. Okay? And antibodies go into our blood, and they can go everywhere, so it's widespread. So think about if you get the measles or the mumps or one of these diseases that goes all over your body. These antibodies can go all over your body to try to fight off these diseases. And then we have T cells, and they actually are kind of attack cells as well. So we're going to talk about this in a separate lecture. We're going to focus on these innate defenses today. The surface barriers and then the internal defenses, your kind of your big phagocytic cells and things like that. So if you remember, when we think about the immune system, this is closely associated again with the lymphatic system. Okay, so a lot of the things are going to be the same organs. So you have your tonsils and adenoids, you have your lymph nodes and lymph vessels, you have your thymus. Again, you have cervical lymph nodes, you have axillary lymph nodes, you have your spleen. You have those Peyer's patches on the small intestine, the appendix on the large intestine, you have inguinal lymph nodes, and then the bone marrow. Okay, so remember, bone marrow, that's where those B cells and T cells are made. So the same organs that we've talked about with lymphatics and the lymphoid organs are the same organs that we're going to talk about with immunity. So those organs of the immune system, you have the skin, you have the bone marrow, thymus, spleen, lymph nodes, tonsils, adenoids, Peyer's patches, and the appendix. So the skin, that's that barrier. That's just that innate, non-specific barrier. It's just a barrier between pathogens in the body, and it actually secretes an acid mantle that helps, it's kind of like your own hand gel, helps keep bacteria levels down. Now the bone marrow, again, that's where your B cells and T cells are made, okay, and all your other white blood cells, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. Do you remember the difference? Eosinophils come out if you have like a parasitic infection, remember that? So protecting you against parasites. Your thymus is very important in helping mature in your T cells, which teaches you self from non-self. We'll talk about that. That's adaptive. So this is part of the adaptive system. Your spleen, remember, has two functions. One is to get rid of old blood cells. But the other one is a place for T cells and B cells to kind of hang out and look for things. Remember, I call those the watchtower areas. Lymph nodes, also a watchtower. It's where macrophages and B cells and T cells are filtering out those antigens, marking them to be destroyed. Your tonsils and adenoids, these are those mucus, those malts. So just like your skin, it's innate, it's non-specific. It's looking for anything that's coming across the mouth and airway to catch and get rid of any kind of ingested or breathed-in pathogen. Peyer's patches, again, that's mucous membranes in the small intestine looking for pathogens that are coming through the digestive system. And then the appendix. And I think we mentioned earlier, it also may be a storehouse for good bacteria. Again, there's different views on what the appendix actually does. Okay, so these internal defenses. So we talked about you have innate, you have surface barriers to the skin, and then the things that are deep to the skin, the internal. And these are chemicals and cells. And this is, if something breaks the skin, if something breaks that epidermis, that natural protective layer, if something breaks that, we've got to have a way to get rid of the pathogen once it breaks the skin. And so we have phagocytes, natural killer cells. We have an inflammatory response where we have macrophages and mast cells that will cause chemicals to be released and cause white blood cells to come into an area and get inflammation. You've actually seen this before when we talked about skin and how the skin responds to inflammation. So some of this may be reviewed either from your 201 lectures as well, because we talked about skin and the cells that are involved in the skin earlier. We talked about there's antimicrobial proteins. You actually have things called interferons and complement proteins that work to mark and destroy pathogens. And then you have fever. Fever is a natural way to basically heat an area or the entire body if needed and kill. So that's what a fever is. So you really, to have a fever is not necessarily a bad thing. It's your body's natural way of trying to defend against something. If it gets above 102, 103, you start to get a little worried. You don't want a fever that's 104, 105. You start to have brain damage. But 102, 103, that's your body actually trying to fight off the infection. You may feel horrible, but your body is trying. All right, so the two main phagocytes we're going to talk about are your macrophages and your neutrophils, okay? And so remember, macrophages come from monocytes. So monocytes are made in the bone marrow. So these are monocytes that have left the blood to become a macrophage. So they are free to wander through areas. And so you have some in your lungs called alveolar macrophages. So as you breathe things in, you've got macrophages there that are waiting to clean out things in your lungs. You have them specialized ones called Kupffer cells, and microglia or microglial cells in the brain, Kupffer cells in the liver. So you have these macrophages all over your body. Again, some of them are specialized to certain regions and some of them are just free in your body. You also have neutrophils. Now the neutrophils, they're in your blood, but remember they can leave. They can leave the blood and go out into the tissues. Okay, so if they encounter something that's infectious, they will become a phagocyte. So just as a review, hopefully remember what phagocytosis is. It's cell eating. It's a cell eating something. So let's just say these little green things, this is whatever the pathogen is. So this is the big purple thing, is the phagocytic cell. It's going to basically wrap around and engulf that foreign particle and make it into a little vesicle. Remember things like neutrophils, those granulocytes, remember those granules? And so in the case of a neutrophil, it's going to add those vesicles and empty those lysosomes, whatever's inside the vesicle, into that vesicle. And that is going to basically release enzymes that will digest whatever that is. And then you're going to spit that digested particle out via something called exocytosis. So as these things are being brought in, this phagocytosis, that's also called endocytosis. So phagocytosis is a specialized form of endocytosis. Do you remember what penocytosis was? That's cell drinking. So if you had like a liquid particle, liquid that needed to be engulfed, that would be penocytosis. All right, and this is just a cool slide just to let you guys, I like it when you can actually see something. It's this imaginary world of A&P that we talk about. It's a lot of use your imagination, but we actually do have some slides of how things actually work. And this is a very large macrophage, this big purple thing, and it is going out and grabbing with little pseudopods these green bacteria. So this just kind of shows you how that would actually look, which is just kind of neat. All right, so again, those innate defenses those internal defenses include fever. And so when we think about these internal defenses, we want to talk about inflammation. And inflammation is a natural way for our body to respond to a non-specific pathogen. Okay, it could be a bacteria, it could be a virus, it could be a splinter, something foreign in our body. Our body will respond to it. And we don't ever have to have seen it before or never have to see it again. Our bodies will just naturally respond to something that's broken that skin, that surface barrier, or even if you cut your mouth, chew on your cheek and kind of cut into your mouth. And what we get is called inflammation. And when you talk about inflammation, we use what's called the term cardinal signs. And so if you have these things all showing up, then you're in an inflammatory response. You're mounting an immune response. And so if you have, and someone says, oh, that looks infected, you may have heard somebody say that. Or maybe they said it looks inflamed. So if it's inflamed, it's going to be red, it's going to be hot, maybe swollen, maybe hurts. And there may be some impairment of function. I mean, maybe it's a joint. You can't move the joint. If you start to see pus, which is infiltration of white blood cells, then you definitely, you're looking at more of an infection, and you've maybe an out of control inflammation. And so how does that inflammation occur? Again, you've probably seen something like this very similar earlier in the semester and also in 201, where you have a foreign object, okay, and everything in our world is covered in bacteria, and so that's going to introduce these bacteria into the tissue, and so we've cut through that surface epidermis, that surface layer, so now that next layer of innate defenses, that internal defense is going to kick in, and you're going to have cells like mast cells and macrophages that are going to release chemicals, and that's going to cause those blood vessels to open up, become leaky, allow the neutrophils to exit, which is called diapedesis. Remember? And they're going to sniff their way, they're going to follow those chemicals, sniff their way to where the bacteria are and get rid of them. Okay? So remember, you have leukocytosis, which is where more white blood cells enter into the blood system. Okay, so if you're mounting an immune response, you're going to release more neutrophils. Those vessels are going to become leaky, allowing the neutrophils to leave or diapedese out. And they're going to chemotax or follow that chemical trail to the bacteria and then destroy it. So again, this is an innate internal defense, non-specific. It doesn't matter if that's a nail or a tack or a splinter or what kind of bacteria these are. If once you've broken the surface of the skin and introduced something foreign into the skin, this is going to happen. Okay? All right, so again, about fever. This is a systemic response to invading microorganisms. And so when you have been invaded, leukocytes and macrophages actually, when they're exposed to a foreign substance, they're going to secrete what are called pyrogens. So like pyrotechnics or fireworks, pyro means fire. And so these pyrogens set your internal thermostat upwards. So they kind of Think about your teeter-totter of homeostasis. They set that normal temperature a little bit higher. So instead of 98.6, it may be 100 up to 105 or even higher. 105 is kind of, again, you're looking at brain damage if it gets much higher than 105. And this is dangerous if it goes on long enough, if it gets too high, because heat will denature proteins. So just like you put a steak on a hot stove and break it down, high fever will do the same thing. So anywhere from 99 to 101, that high of a temperature is enough to start breaking down bacteria. Okay, so if you've got a harmful bacteria in your body, those higher temperatures is enough to denature the proteins of the bacteria and help you get rid of them and not do damage to yourself. Again, if it gets much higher than 101, we consider that fever. 102, 103, 104. Again, 105, you need to be seeking medical attention because that can cause severe damage. But you don't want to just kill a fever. So if you're starting to feel sick and you've got that 99, 100, 101, 102, you don't necessarily want to stop that fever because it is helping you out. Some of the benefits, it causes the liver and the spleen to sequester, which means take out or store or get out of circulation, iron and zinc. And microorganisms like bacteria need iron and zinc, and so they can't live without it. So you're basically taking away something that they need, which will allow them to die. It also increases your metabolic rate, so things are speeding up, which allows you to speed up repair. If you think back to our first anatomy and physiology chemistry, we talked about how to make chemical reactions go faster, one thing you can do is add heat, and so that's what fever is doing. It's speeding up metabolism to help you repair and heal faster. All right. Oh, that's it. All right, so the next video, we'll talk about those adaptive defenses. We're going to talk about humoral immunity and cellular immunity. Okay, thanks a lot.